welcome to Textile Talks. I'm Amy Milne, Executive Director of the Quilt Alliance, and I'm connecting from the foothills of beautiful Western North Carolina. I'm glad you chose to join us today, and I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. Textile Talks is a weekly series presented on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time in partnership with the Quilt Alliance and our three partner organizations shown here: International Quilt Museum, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. All talks are recorded and available via YouTube, and I'll ask my colleague Lucy Shaken of SACWA to enter the link for the Textile Talks YouTube recording playlist in the chat box now. The Quilt Alliance mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of quilts and their makers. And in today's program, we're going to call attention to an aspect of documentation that we don't address very often: the documentation of our workplaces. Today, you'll see a compilation of video excerpts from the StoryBee series that the Quilt Alliance produced from 2018 to 2021. And host Frances O'Roark Dowell served as the interviewer for most of the StoryBee episodes that you see here. And the Quilt Alliance shared the videos with its members monthly. And the format is mostly the same for each of the interviews. For each interviewee: a virtual visit via Zoom with Frances and a conversation followed by a tour of their workspace. The video series is archived in the Quilt Alliance member portal, so members can access it anytime. 38 artists, designers, historians, authors, industry leaders generously participated in the StoryBee series, and you can view short teasers for each episode at quiltalliance.org/storybee, and I'll have Lucy ask Lucy to put that in the chat box now. The Quilt Alliance, as many of you know, is a member-supported organization. It's open to anyone: quilters, quilt lovers, quilt historians, anyone who loves quilts of any style, age, skill level, or location. We have individual members and guild and group members, and our community has never been larger or more active. So we're excited to share these excerpts from the StoryBee archive today as a preview of just one of the many benefits of being a member. So I'm going to have Lucy ask Lucy one more time to put a link to our membership page in the chat. We'd love to have you as a member. Just a quick reminder, housekeeping: please put your questions in the Q&A box and use the chat box for greetings and technical help. And one thing I want to point out is when you're putting a chat message, look at that blue 2 box. It's a drop down. It says everyone or hosts and panelists. Make sure you select everyone if you want your message to go to the whole group. Sometimes people forget and it just comes to us. And a reminder that after you disconnect today, there is a web survey that pops up in your browser. We would love to get your feedback on today's program, the entire series. We just love hearing from you. It helps us make this series better and better. And a reminder that we have enabled the closed caption feature. We have a live captioner on the call today, so you can turn that on or off using the CC or live captions button. And I also want to mention that we do have some pre-recorded. I'm going to show you a video that's pre-recorded, and so we may have to adjust. You may have to adjust the volume. I will have it all the way up. And I'm going to pause for just a second, Lucy, because I noticed that my video was, hold on just a second, talk amongst yourselves. Because the video was showing the little strip at the bottom. I don't see the setting for that. We may just have to live with that. Okay. That's okay. Nobody mad at us, as we like to say in my house. So what I'm going to show you is a compilation we're going to watch, and it includes excerpts featuring artists Victoria Findlay Wolfe, Ricky Timms, Denyse Schmidt, Gwen Westerman, Marianne Fons, and Latifah Saafir. And in between the experts, I have added suggestions for documentation habits that you might consider in relationship to your workplace and documenting your workplace. And I've got a work tips sheet that I'm going to ask Lucy to put in the chat, and you can look at that as you're watching the video if you'd like. You can download it. It's a series we're starting, Start a Documentation Habit, and this one pertains to workspaces. And then after I play the video, Latifah Saafir will join us, artist and designer and entrepreneur Latifah Saafir, and she's going to give us she's included in the StoryBee video, and her workspace has changed quite a bit. So she's going to give us a quick tour of that space, and then join me for a discussion about workspaces and documentation. So let's get started with the video, and we'll see you after.
Hi, this is Frances O'Roark Dowell with the Quilt Alliance StoryBee, and today we are talking with Victoria Findlay Wolfe. And here's Victoria now in her studio in New York City. Hi, Victoria.
Hey.
Hey. I'm hoping we can start off with a tour of your studio. Can you walk us around and show us some things?
Well, I can do a little spin. I wouldn't say there's all that much room to do a walking tour, but you'll get a pretty good view of what happens in this space. So we are in my New York City studio. This is a space where I create everything, but is not open to the public. I have a store also in the same building, which is open to the public. But this is where I'm doing my daily work. And you've caught me at a time when I'm working on probably 15 to 20 projects all at the same time. January is a time when I'm not traveling so much, so I'm home. And when I'm home and not traveling, I got to be sewing my little brains out. So that's exactly what I've been doing this week.
And how much time every day do you spend in your studio?
Oh, I'm here all day long.
Are you? You play music?
Home, and then my daughter's doing homework, and then I'll be doing binding. So I put in a lot of hours every day, every week, and it's definitely a 7-day-a-week job.
And when you're in your studio, are you listening to music, watching Netflix, or is it just you and the fabric?
Sometimes it's a podcast, depending on if my staff is here as well. There'll be music playing, or if the long arm is going, then it's kind of hard to hear anything. So it kind of depends on the day and the mood. Generally, if I'm in here by myself, it might be a podcast or it might be quiet. But if my staff and stuff are in here, we're usually having a really good time. And our little secret is there'll be country music playing.
Ooh.
I know. Who thought a girl in New York City is listening to country music?
Start a documentation habit. Take a spin around your studio with your video camera every 6 to 12 months. Go slowly and be sure to record items on tables, on walls and shelves, in cabinets, and on the floor.
So hey everybody, welcome to my studio. Let's start with the coolest thing, I think, which is this 125-year-old Egyptian market door. That's the entrance to the studio, and I got it on a slider, so it opens like that, and then we go into the studio. I have quilts on the wall, of course, because you got to decorate. But when you come into the studio, the first thing that you're going to notice is the table. My sewing table is custom made, and it really was built around the storage units from IKEA. I've got my sewing machine on one side. Because the table is high and I'm sitting in a high chair, I have a stool on the bottom that is for my foot so that I can reach the pedal at the bottom. One of the coolest features I've got on my table is this little button right here. When I hit it, watch what happens. Wow. So I can lower everything down to a normal sitting height if I want to, or I can keep it up high. You know, the surprising thing for me is that I keep it up high most of the time because I'm comfortable in the high chair, and with the stool at the bottom, I can reach the pedal. Then I've got all of my little units, and my units have scissors, cutters. Of course, I've got a drawer with pins and needles. And then I also have my favorite drawer in the studio, which is my sticky stuff drawer. It has glue and tape and Velcro, and anything that sticks goes in my sticky stuff drawer. I also really love my cutting mat. The height of the table works really well for me. And I think that every studio should have a proper ironing surface. My ironing surface is basically made out of plywood, covered with cotton batting, and then covered with fabric. It's all stapled to the back side. I can recover this anytime I want. And because my table is at a right height, then I'm able to go ahead and iron at a comfortable level. Now, as we move on to the other side, I've got some storage units with bins. I keep odds and ends in these. I should have them better labeled, but because this is a new studio and it's not even completely finished yet, this is just how it is for me right now with the various things. I have, of course, quilts on the wall, and I have a large dining room table in the middle of the room. This is kind of because we got a new table in the dining room, and I didn't have a place for this table, so it's currently sitting in the middle of the room, but it serves a great purpose. I can lay a few things out. Also, you can't have a studio without a design wall. So my design wall is actually the entire wall. Right now, you'll see that it's just sheetrock. But I have plans to cover that with ceiling tiles, the acoustical ceiling tiles that you can pin into. I will attach those, then I will cover that with batting, then I will cover that with flannel, and I will have floor-to-ceiling design wall. I had that in my old studio. I love it, and that's what I plan to do here. Of course, I'm a musician, so in my creative space, I have my computer with my keyboard so that I can make a little music and compose as well. I love the views outside the window. I never expected for this particular house to be able to have views in certain directions, but whenever the grading was done, the house was kind of elevated, so out of the studio, I've got views I never thought I would have. Now, I knew I would have my views out to my beautiful rock that I call Autumn Rock. As you can see, the trees are burned because we had the horrible wildfire just 3 weeks ago. I'm very thankful and very fortunate that I have a house and that I have a studio, because the burn came within, in places it came within 30 feet of the house. And we're just really lucky to have some trees near the house that didn't burn, so there is a little bit of green right outside, but the 2,000 acres that surrounds me is pretty much all burned. Anyway, that's my studio. I love being here. It's not the world's greatest space, but it's my space, and I love it. I hope that you have a great space that you can work into.
Ricky, thank you so much.
Start a documentation habit. Take and record measurements of the height of tables and chairs that works just right for you. Take still photos to document the layout of the room from each corner. If you have to move or recreate your workspace in the future, you'll be ready.
But what we're going to do right now is we're going to tour the studio, and I'm very excited because just looking behind you on that wall, I'm like, what's there? So
What's there?
but thank you for taking the time to talk, and now we're going to take a little time to tour.
Okay. Well, this is my workspace. I have a lot of counters and cabinets that were in this house before I moved into it. I painted the cabinet doors with chalkboard paint so I would know what was in there and be able to keep important dates and ideas right at hand. A lot of music. So I have my stereo set up down here as well. And I'm always working on more than one project at once. So I've got a horse mask here, and that's going to be a quilted horse mask. So there's that tradition in Plains native life where horses are dressed as well. So this would go over the horse's face and his ears would be sticking out. I hand dye my own fabric. I use a process called snow resist, and which is perfect since I live in Minnesota. And I really like the textures and the way the snow moves the dye through the fabric. It's almost like a tie-dye, but not exactly. So you know that as a landscape artist, a lot of my stuff is going to be blue because there's always a lot of sky to be had. But you can see the kind of colors that I've got here that are part of that process. There was one spring where I went to a conference the second week in March, and there was still a lot of snow on the ground, so I thought I could dye fabric when I came back. And when I came back, there was only snow left along the bases of the tree line in the back of my house. And so I was out there with a bucket and a little shovel trying to get the last of the snow. I'm sure my farm neighbors thought I was absolutely stark-raving mad. So a lot of my supplies are right at hand, and that helps me stay organized. Fabric. Love these wire baskets. And again, everything just kind of color coordinated. Here's my design wall. And there are two different projects on this design wall. One is a landscape, but the other things that you see are for a project for quilts that I made that reflect war mothers' songs. And you know, a lot of people talk about veterans and supporting veterans, but in our Plains Native tradition, the mothers of soldiers and Marines and veterans are honored as well, because in that Plains tradition, people recognize the sacrifice that mothers make sending their children to war. So this has information that I've been using for Tule Lake incarceration camp for Japanese Americans during World War II. There are images of Plains Indian women at the turn of the 20th century. One of the mothers has a gold star flag as part of her blanket, but they're dressed in traditional dress. And yeah. And a Hmong cut cloth embroidered piece that also helps tell the story of the Hmong during the Vietnam War, because there's a large Hmong population here in Minnesota.
Is that a piece you made, Gwen, or is that a piece that
No,
you're using for
no.
inspiration?
That's a piece I'm using for inspiration. And then my little awards wall. That always makes me happy.
Yeah. Look at all those ribbons.
And then there's the rest of my basement, so don't look at that.
Well, you need to tell us what kind of iron you use and what kind of sewing machine, and we'll ignore the rest of your basement.
Start a documentation habit. Regularly take photos or videos of works in progress on tables and design walls. Also document research and inspirational content you have pinned up in your space.
Downtown Bridgeport, and you can see, I don't know how well you can see, some of the other buildings, in the neighborhood. And my library of both books I use for inspiration, but also, you know, all my binders of projects. So I have, you know, for instance, every fabric collection. It's not very well organized, but this is what I've sent to the mill and my marketing stuff and all that jazz. So there's one for each collection. And then I have books for quilts. So for instance, the quilt on this rack, this was most of the quilts I made when I started out were more one of a kind. And this was part of a series I did for an exhibition in Denver, Colorado. It's called, it ended up, the whole design theme ended up being based on my misperceptions of the American West. And this one, you know, mostly informed by watching Clint Eastwood movies. So this one's called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And this is called Painted Lady. This was Saddle Blanket. Prairie Rose.
I love them, even if they're
and I used
misperceptions.
these woolens. There was a great fabric store in Bridgeport that closed, and it was one of those places that had all this dead stock from the 60s and 70s, and everybody that worked in there was and the wall of button boxes. So these woolens were all from there, and they have little details like this. You can hardly see it, but this is a tiny piece from a vintage kimono. This is like the sheriff's badge with the gold thread in it. Okay. Do we have time to go into the back?
I do.
Yes, we'd love to see the back.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right, well,
close
first
the
we'll
back.
stop-
And then can we finish up with you on the exercise ball, just kind of bouncing up and down?
Yeah, it kind of fell off at the workshop, so that would be really hysterical. This is my mom, and this was a project from my first book. This frame, I can't remember the name of the project, but they all had really great names. And I have all the magazines that I've been in over the
Is that
years.
you? Were you a cover girl for American Craft?
I was.
Wow.
It's a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure they did some photoshopping. But all the, I don't know what to do with these anymore, all these magazines. It's taking up too much space. This is the storage area. And this is this great map of Connecticut, so you can see where we are. We are here.
Oh, cool.
And this is Long Island Sound.
Mm-hmm.
So New York is down here, New York City. You can see Bridgeport was the home of P.T. Barnum. He was actually the mayor.
I did not know that.
Yep. And we have the Barnum Museum here in Bridgeport, and Tom Thumb's house is in Bridgeport.
So you are not the only reason to come to Bridgeport. There's a lot there.
There's a lot of reasons. All these things, the Clock Museum, dairy farming,
Wow.
farming, trap rock quarry, all kinds of things. So come on back.
Here we go.
Into the bowels of my locker storage. I got this in Rhode Island. It's
Oh, that's
great, but
cool.
they're squeaky. What? Oh yeah, it has this is where I keep miscellaneous items like string for wrapping up fabric bundles and labels.
What was that? Is that old, or was it made specifically just to be very cool storage, or is there a story to it?
It's a vintage gym locker, and I had two of them. I sold one, but they took all the 13s off.
Oh, really? Because they're bad luck?
I guess it has no 13.
Oh, interesting.
I know.
That's very cool.
And all my patterns. This is the shipping department.
Nice. It's like Amazon back there.
Solids.
And are those all your solids? Do you make some?
No, not entirely.
Okay.
These are mine. My little So yeah, I have a little bit of fabric, and then all my vintage bits and pieces.
Wow.
And my fabric scraps, which I emptied out. That's about it.
That's great. Well, that's an amazing space. I don't know if I'm more jealous of the windows or the floors or the lockers. And we'll work that out.
Yeah.
Start a documentation habit. Make a recording of the books in your library. A slow pan of the spines of books in your collection once a year will give you an important video record if you ever need to replace items. Consider doing the same thing for equipment and supplies in your workspace, and use that footage to create an inventory list for insurance purposes.
Bye.
Okay, so I'm so excited to share my studio with you. We're on Washington Island. Frances and I already talked about that. And so my little studio is not in my home when I'm in Wisconsin. So I'm going to take you through the yard to the little boathouse. So let's go. And Scrabble's coming along. Come on, Scrabs. So I'm walking through the yard. The lake is back behind me. That's Lake Michigan. It's pretty calm today. Some days it's very, very busy. And so I just walk about 100 paces, and even though we have a kind of a large boathouse, not that big of a boathouse on the water, we're not sure this little shed ever was an actual boathouse, but we call it the little boathouse. So here's the pathway. My husband Mark built the pathway for me, and he put rocks on each side of it. So cute. So we walk through the forest, kind of. Scrabble's on her way in. She's preceding me. She has a reason for preceding me. My oldest, Hannah, painted the Scandinavian hex sign. I'm not sure how authentic it is, but I love it. And so in we go. So this is it. It's not real big, and of course before I go on I have to give Scrabble her cookie. Here you go. There you go. So, I'm not sure just what size this is. I mean, maybe 20 by 25, something like that. My design wall over here on the left, on my left, usually has a quilt on it. I'm not working on something right this minute, but you can see there's about 1 million threads stuck to it, so shows it has had lots of use. I have a chair for guests, and my husband Mark often brings hors d'oeuvres, a glass of wine in the evening if I've been sewing all day. I've got a quilt of valor that I'll talk about in a minute. I don't keep a lot of fabric here because it's very damp here. You probably can see cobwebs and little bugs everywhere. You're okay. And so, things get damp and I don't want that to happen. So I tend to bring fabric in bins like this, and I kind of like bring a kit that I'm going to work on, just the fabric for that one thing. I do have some fabrics in this cupboard that I usually have to use a screwdriver to open in the spring because it is swole shut. So I have some flannels and some solids and just kind of leftovers from different projects. So come here, Scrabble. Come here. Just a minute. Sit. That's it. Come here. Okay. You're going to be part of this. Okay. So back to you. So I have a big ironing board. Here's another example of sort of a kit. So this is 1850, 1910 era fabrics. So I just bring kind of scraps that I like. I make something out of them, and then when I take it home to Iowa, I might pick out a setting fabric or a sashing fabric or whatever it needs. So this one over here. This is a quilt of valor that is completed. I taught quilting at the Fiber Art School here on Washington Island for around 20 years. And there's an active Quilts of Valor group here. We have a week-long, approximately, sew-in every spring. And my rookie and I made this quilt, and it went off to the quilter. I put the binding on, and I need to come over here and sit and turn the binding by hand, which I love to do. So there's that. Then also, probably one of the most interesting aspects of my little boathouse sewing room is the chalkboard wall. And Mark painted that for me when the building got finished, and it's sort of like a record of the quilts I've made. And in fact, I'm going to kind of point over this way, over here, is a lot of them I have put the date of when I made. So like flannel cabins gave to Joyce, my friend Joyce, napkins for bread and water. I make the napkins with my serger for my sister-in-law. Flying Flags is a quilt of valor that I awarded to Bob James the husband of artist James. Many people know about the wonderful James family. And so on and on, the different quilts that I've made. Remembered Friends I gave to AQSG. Boughs and Berries I donated to Covered Bridge Quilters. Trellis, I started it here, completed it in August. Town Square, I gave that one to John Barrett in Winterset, who gave a kidney for a former student. I thought, he needs a quilt, so he got that one. So, so I think the one other thing everybody wanted to know about was...
Start a documentation habit. If your workspace is outside of your home, take a video of the entrance and exterior of your studio. Also, if you use chalkboards or dry erase boards to record information, be sure to take regular photos for your permanent archives.
Now I'm in my studio. I say studio very loosely because I helped to care for my 97-year-old grandfather. We moved into his home to make his quality of life for his last few years as high as possible. And so I work in a very small space. I'm actually in my bedroom. This is on one kind of third of my bedroom. And you see it's set up a little bit like a studio, like a studio for shooting, and that's because that's what it is. This is also where I shoot my YouTube videos. So instead of repainting walls and doing a lot of things, I went and tried to do it a streamlined enough process where I can make it still usable for actually creating and sewing and designing, but also be able to convert easily for shooting for my studio. So I believe you can see on the video, on your left-hand side, you see a series of cabinets that holds a lot of my fabric. Okay, I'm lying, probably about half of my fabric. The rest is in the closet. The closet is behind this wall here on the back. That actually is just a white, rectangular grid quilt that I got off Amazon. I thought it made a nice backdrop. But when that's lifted up, it's my closet. So half of it's my clothes. The other half is other fabric and stuff inside of the closet. This is where my sewing machine lives. I have several machines that fit in this table. It's a portable table, so the legs can fold under, and if I want to take it to retreat or whatever, but this is where my sewing machine lives. My guy is great enough where he's kind of manages with me, kind of taking up part of our space while we're in this situation, this living situation and trying to manage this. He's very supportive of the business as well as of helping to care for my grandfather through this period in his life. And then I have here, I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but it's just a tray table, and on it also resides an 18 by 24 cutting mat, which is where I keep it. Sometimes I'll set an ironing board up just outside of the room. If I need to cut on a larger mat, then that happens on the dining room table. Most of my work is done in front of my computer since I focus primarily on designing and producing product. And a lot of time that's on my bed, which is in that part of the room, which you guys can't see much of, or it's at a chair at the tray table. So,
Latifah,
yes.
can I ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we move away, we'd love to know what kind of machine you use.
I am a Janome girl, and my first big girl machine was a Janome 6600. So when they came out with the 6700 about a year or two ago, then I knew I had to have it. So this is the Janome 6700.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I love it. And I do all of my piecing on it, but I also do a lot of my quilting. If I'm quilting my own quilts, I do all my quilting on it as well. So I love it. And I think you can see a corner of this part of the room. When I shoot my YouTube videos, it usually gets covered as well. But that's actually my shipping station. So my printer for labels, my Dymo printer, my scale sits over there until I use it. We're going to have to take it down. So when Quilt Alliance asked me to do this for StoryBee and to show my space, I'm like, well, I don't really have a beautiful, area that is super inspiring and all of that, but I really wanted to show it to all of you because I wanted to show you that we can make beautiful things in small spaces, and we can do a lot and make the best out of the spaces that we have as well. So I create all my, when I develop my clammy templates, my rulers, when I do patterns, fabric design. It all happens in this little space in here.
Do you
So,
think there are actually advantages to having a smaller space than a huge studio?
I think that any time you have a situation where you have limits, it forces you to be way more creative.
I like that.
And it's just like when you're growing up and you don't have money and you only have a little bit, it causes you to be creative and trying to figure out how to make that little bit stretch. And this is kind of the same way. So like my cabinets are from IKEA. It's a $50 quilt on the wall, which is my backdrop. I did buy professional lighting, so you'll see that I'm lit fairly well. And I set it up in here since we were shooting a video, but that's what I do for my YouTube videos. It's a $50 rug on the floor, but it looks professional enough for me to switch over from just creating to being able to shoot a YouTube video as well. So
I think it's great.
I have a few quilts around. Because of the dynamic of my sewing space, I don't have room for a lot of inspiring things on the walls. When this quilt comes down and you see the closet doors, my closet doors do have a lot of things taped to it. And that's just like if I'm working on sewing a bunch of quilts or whatever reminders or guidelines for getting things done, that happens. There's stacks of quilts in the house. Most of my quilts get put up in storage because they're working quilts and traveling quilts, so they go with me to teach. But I always have projects around.
Start a documentation habit. Consider recording a self-guided tour of your workspace as a video journal entry. Enlist a friend to operate the camera or use a tripod. Documenting each space you work in will allow you to revisit different seasons of your creative life in the future. I hope you enjoyed that. And I'd like to welcome and introduce Latifah Saafir. Latifah, if you want to come and join me on camera. We were so impressed with, there you are, hi.
Hello.
We were so impressed with Latifah's studio tour in StoryBee because it was so relatable and it was inspirational. And I think everyone loves an expansive, beautiful studio space, but that's not the reality for most people. And I think you were able to show such a professional space and efficient space that I was really curious about your space now. So I want to give a little introduction for you before you start on your giving us an updated tour, because I also really love your bio. I think it's so well written and so visual. So I'm going to read it just as you sent it. Latifah is a professional seam ripper and hoarder of fabric. She tries to justify her Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering degree by designing cool, multifunctional tools for quilters to use. She loves to challenge quilters to try hard things and make it a bit easier by developing easy-to-follow techniques for such skills as curved piecing, bias tape applique, and half rectangle triangles. Having learned how to sew as a kid, Latifah tries to brainwash and influence kids to also fall in love with sewing through her line of products, Quilt Cadets, specifically designed for kids who sew. Her secret wish is to fill the world with quilty friends, which is why she selfishly co-founded the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild and the Worldwide Modern Quilt Guild. Her biggest love is to teach, but most days she can be found sitting in front of the computer, feverishly trying to break the code to create a pattern that goes viral. So good, Latifah.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy.
It's so great to have you here. I feel like that part 2 could be you giving a workshop on artist statements.
It's still a struggle for me. I always it's not right yet. So lately I've just been throwing a little humor at it, and I think we can all take ourselves a little bit more lightly. So
absolutely. And it's a great reflection because all the information is there. You know, it's also very factual, but it's just colorful and a reflection of you.
yes.
So tell us about your space now. Can we see where you are now?
So yes, I'm actually in the same home, and my space is actually in my home, which I love because I can roll out of bed in the middle of the night and work if I need to. And I mentioned in the last video that we moved to my grandfather's home to take care of him, and he was 97 then. He passed 2 years ago at a day shy of 101. And so it's been a huge adjustment afterwards. But when he passed, of course, we're still in his home for now. And so I'm like, I had more space to move into instead of trying to fit into my tiny bedroom. And so we took up the space. I took up the space at the back of the house. There's two smaller rooms. So I'll walk around shortly and you'll see some of the same things from the same cabinets. They've expanded a little bit. And let me move this just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to show you my computer. So I'm going to walk around just a little, but on this side of the room, I now have a wall full of cabinets.
Oh, wow.
And this is pretty much where all my fabric lives. I am not one of those people who can have a lot of my fabric exposed because of the fact that I'm just not that neat. And so if I open, it's pretty organized and coordinated. Like that's black and white fabric there, but it's literally just folded and placed inside. I still use a lot of the same techniques for organization. I accidentally stumbled upon kind of a Marie Kondo sort of method for when you work in a small space. So I only keep fabric I love, and I still do that. So every once or twice a year, I go through my whole fabric stash, and especially if the bins start to get really full. I noticed yesterday that the yellow bin is really, really full now. And so when that starts to happen, then I'll actually go through and take out all the fabric I don't love. So if we come around, we have my ironing station here and my cutting station here. You see the lights because I still shoot videos inside of my room. I have a big television up here, and that helps me to be able to see myself, my videos when I'm shooting them. I hope I'm not moving too fast for here.
No, it's good.
On this wall here, I do have a design wall, but it's really small. Quite frankly, I do most of my designing on my computer. And so that's just to throw things up on the wall sometime. It's still a relatively small space, so I take advantage of hanging things on the walls and that type of thing. And this corner looks a little bit cluttered now because that's where I'm sitting to shoot this video, but it's my where I sew. And I can stage that as well. Then the second room is more of an office space. So I have chairs for lounging. This is sort of my shipping station here. We have my printer, a little magnetic board on the wall for inspiration. And then this is the only exposed fabric that I have. And that is just a lot of solids that I have that I work with, and a few other fabrics on the wall. So it's not a huge space still. And I definitely make it work for me. So I'm moving back over so I can take a seat here I've been walking around with my laptop. So I hope that wasn't too jumbled for you guys to see. And I utilize the closets. I try to be as organized as I can be. So the closets have, I hang all of my quilts that need to be quilted or works in progress as much as possible. A lot of these bins up top are filled with old whips in them. I have tried to be all organized so that when I get inspired, I can pull it out and pull one. I try to balance working on new work with old work, or else I'll never get the old work done. And someone asked where I store my finished work.
Yeah.
I do utilize my garage for all of my patterns and products and that type of thing as well. And I have big bins in the garage where I store my quilts, which I have way too many. I'm in the middle of doing a sample sale now for the very first time to get rid of some old work that I just probably won't have a use for, just to sort of pare things down. We're also anticipating moving in the next year or two. And if we do that, I want it to be manageable now before we actually have to move it all. So yeah, so that's my space.
It's beautiful, and it's so professional looking. It's like anywhere you pointed the camera, I cannot relate to that, how clean it is, because it looks so well organized, and it feels like you have retained some of the same philosophies that you had back in 2019, sort of keeping your space camera ready, even though you said you're not neat enough with your fabric, it still creates this nice patterned effect of having the gray and black and white shell, cubes there. And it's even,
Right.
you're even coordinating what you have on with the aesthetic in your room. It's such a vibe. I love it. And it's so comes across as being so professional. And when I think of your brand, I think of very professional, clean, modern look.
Yeah.
And you embody that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the only real color, I have really bright, colorful rugs on both of the floor.
I
And
noticed.
there's a little bit of artwork in the other room, but for the most part, I need a blank space to be able to create and design from. And so that's what I create. So I don't have a lot of bright, colorful things on the walls. And this works for me because I can be as messy as I want to be when inside of the cubicles.
Right.
And I also like this sort of container concept. There's a book called oh goodness, I'll think of it in a minute, but it's a book
Yeah.
about destashing basically, or decluttering, but it's about containers. So if it doesn't fit in the container, you get rid of it. You put all your favorite things in and whatever doesn't fit. And I really do use that to sort of, because it's so easy for us to get out of control with fabric,
Yeah.
And I also, the other thing that's I think is hilarious, I mentioned we're going to probably move in a year or two. I think, do I want to move this? Whenever I go to buy more,
Oh gosh, yeah. Like,
do I want to move this as
yeah,
well? So
making an investment in your stuff, how much you love it. Like, do I really love it that much to lift all that?
exactly. Exactly. And I do love this. I tried the Marie. I'm all about decluttering because we have one we're in my grandfather's home that he was in for 60 years or so. And so you understand about accumulate. And he was really neat with stuff, but still the amount of stuff you have to get rid of. But I was just about to say something I forgot. Oh, but I tried the condo method with a lot of things. And that's, do you love it? And if you do, you keep it. And that didn't work for anything except for my fabric. But I love it because I can go in my stash, everything I pull out, I love. I found out about myself that I only like to work with fabric I love. Now, I believe you can make beautiful things out of fabric that doesn't make your heart go pitter patter. But personally, as an artist, I love to create with things that I absolutely love. And so, as many, no matter how deep I dig, and it could be a piece of fabric from 15 years ago, I know I still love it. So,
Yeah, it works. And it's both a decluttering and a, just sort of artistic guidance and like brand. I know I'm going to create a certain level of work because I love it and it's going to be
exactly.
genuine to what I love.
Exactly.
So do you document? How often do you do what I was talking about, which is going around the room and videotaping or photographing?
Whenever I'm on video with you guys. It's, we talked a little about this before, and I think we're gonna
Yeah.
get to it in a minute, like with everything
Yeah.
that's going on in the world and the level of destruction. I really thought about, like, if that happened to me, and I'm in Los Angeles and we have the wildfires and everything that are going on. Luckily, I'm far enough to where we only were affected with the smoke and that type of thing. But you have to think, like, are we, how do we deal with all of our stuff? And if we lose it, how does that impact us as well? And I can only think, I know that there are quilts that I want, and probably my sewing machine, but other than that, it's, you want it for insurance purposes and all of that if you need it. But outside of that, I don't document nearly as much as I should. So it's a great reminder to all of us.
That's a good point. It's two reasons. One, for the memory of it and being
Exactly.
able to use that documentation for future work, like as just research, personal research. And then the other is for replacement. And in Western North Carolina, we had a hurricane in September, and the Alliance lost everything in our storage space. It was flooded to the rafters. We lost everything. The last time I photographed that space was probably 5 years ago or something, and it was just a snapshot to show one of my colleagues something. So the reason I'm sort of getting on the back on task is because we didn't do what we always recommend, but we recommend documenting quilts. We never really talk about our space. And I think, you hear this in insurance, people talking about it for your home, for insurance for the items in your home. And I've done that before, but I've never thought about documenting a studio space, and especially like pulling out drawers, like you were pulling out drawers and kind of giving us a look inside. That a lot of the items in our storage space were in bins. Didn't matter. They were all ruined, but now I really regret I did not take a comprehensive video and then use that video to make a list,
Yeah.
an inventory list. But as you said, there's the sentimental value, the creative value, and then the insurance value. And so I think, we can all everyone here on the call today can make these decisions for themselves about what the interval is, what type of documentation you do. You could do video. I just think that's easier because it's sort of like you don't have to worry about whether you have an individual photo. You can stop and kind of get, close in on it. So I'm thinking video as well, but for certain things, maybe close up photos are better. But there's no way to really understand the losses that we have incurred as Americans over the last 6 months. I was reading, and this is probably an underestimate, but 15,000 structures were destroyed so far in the fires in LA. I think there are something like um, I can't remember what the number was. I want to say, oh, it was really high of numbers of people that are homeless now here in Western North Carolina, and a lot of artists, because there was a river arts district right along the water where, artist studios were destroyed. So
Mm.
this is timely. I think we all have to think about what it means. But, then there's also just the artistic value. So are you a person that keeps a sketchbook? I'm kind of curious about the parallels between what you put up on your pin board and what you have in your sketchbook.
So I do, but it's in my computer. So if I have an idea, I'll go immediately to Adobe Illustrator and pull it up and draw it really quickly. And I used to keep lots of random sketchbooks around, but I don't draw. I make a beautiful quilts, but I don't draw very well.
Who you draw on the computer?
So
You
I draw
graph.
on the computer. I can do
Yeah.
that easily. And my design process, I do everything on the computer. So from beginning to end. And so yeah, I do have lots and lots of sketches on my computer. And then I still like to deal with physical things. So I'll print out lots of things. And you saw the board where I have things posted on the board. I'm working on releasing the Hurdy 2 and 3, so half rectangle triangles and other ratios, 1 to 3, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Anyway, and so we're working on that release now. And those actually aren't my designs. They're Caroline Hatley's designs that we're working with. It's going to be a fun release. So, but yeah, it happens all in my computer. And I mean, I think I do document my quilts fairly well. So every time a quilt is made, I get really nice flat shots of them. A lot of them get taken out for glamour shots as well. But like I said, this is probably, as far as documenting my space, this is an excellent reminder for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we can't ever have too many reminders for documentation because even with the people in our lives, other quilters, the Quilt Alliance has an oral history project called QSOS. We're getting ready to invite everyone to sit down with a quilter and interview them. It's a long format oral history. But, when it comes to, I live with my 93-year-old dad. I don't record him enough.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that just it would improve every aspect of our life if we took the time to document it for whatever reason.
Exactly. And we realize the importance of that, especially once people have passed, or there are
Yes.
people who are no longer in our lives, or people like I have both of my great grandmothers on my dad's side of the family were quilters, and they died before I was born. But very little of even the stories exist, or very little of I've never seen any of their work. I know some existed when my dad was younger, but it's been lost. And like I said, I lost my grandfather 2 years ago as well. And I see random videos I see on my phone of him, and I'm like, I should have taken more, because usually it was when he was acting a fool or throwing a tantrum. But I wish I had more. You know what I mean? So
I do.
the importance of documenting our lives is it's greater than we can imagine, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And our ability to save these like in the cloud and things like that, so that we actually, because I thought about like the fires and with everyone losing so much, or the flooding, with the hurricanes and that type of thing, and everyone losing so much. But nowadays a lot of our pictures and things are stored in the cloud, so that does help, somewhat, but being more deliberate about documenting and capturing those moments is important.
Yeah, that is the other part of this, is where are you putting these recordings? When you record things on your phone, how are you uploading? I back up to iCloud, but also to Google Images. So I have a double backup. And I think that anyone who is doing this kind of documenting, just make sure that you have an ending to that. Where is it being archived? Make sure it's just not sitting on your phone only.
Absolutely.
So we've got a couple questions, and we've got about 2 minutes. Well, we got about 1 minute because I need to play my video. But what computer program does Latifah use? I think you said Illustrator.
Yep, I use all the Adobe products. So Illustrator, I use InDesign for patterns and all the Adobe stuff.
Awesome. Well, your work is incredible. I can't tell us when your next release is coming out so we can all follow.
QuiltCon will be soft release for Herdy 2 and 3, and the first 2 patterns for that. And
Oh, fantastic. Will you have a booth?
stuff. I will have a booth at QuiltCon.
What's your booth number?
Booth 636.
Okay.
Right in the middle of QuiltCon prep. It's crazy.
Oh, well, we will see you. We're gonna Quilt
Yay.
Science will have a booth too, so can't wait to see you there.
Oh, perfect.
And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Amy. Thanks for inviting me on.
It was so fun.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm going to share my screen one more time so we can thank our sponsors, and I also want to show what's coming up tomorrow or next week. Let's see, here we go. Next week, we've got a really interesting, Sakwa's presenting Inside the World of Wearable Art. This looks like such a good one. So don't forget to register. And as I mentioned, we have a survey that comes up after the Textile Talk program ends, and it comes up in your browser. We'd love to get your feedback. So please do. Thanks again, Latifah, and to all our sponsors and donors like you for supporting this programming and allowing us to make Textile Talks a free series. Thank you for joining us today. Bye, everyone. Take care.